We're not doing that in our public schools. No, we're teaching wokeism, cancel culture, and now the battle of parents around the country is battling back against critical race theory. One such parent is Deborah Flora. She has a nonprofit, and that's Parents United America. They're mobilizing parents not only against CRT, but all matters of efforts by school boards to shut parents down and shut them out of the education process. Look what they were teaching kids in first grade in this, very expensive private school in New York City. 6-year-olds are teaching, talking about masturbation and other sex ed that is so over the top and inappropriate, contradicting the values of parents. And parents are torn. If they speak up, then their kids get thrown out of the private elite school that they're paying 50, 60 grand a year for, and then they're stuck in the failing New York City public school system. So they shut up. Greg Jarrett is well briefed on this. He had an incredible podcast recently on this, and that is the insanity of CRT. Just recently, Deborah Flora rebuked the Colorado School Board for using critical race theory. They both join us now. And thank you, Deborah Flora, and thank you, Greg Jarrett.
Thank you so much for having me on. I greatly appreciate it.
You went before the school board. You claim parents have been left out of the process to design the district's educational program on every level. How was the reaction?
Well, it's actually very exciting. When I started Parents United America 2 years ago, it was because they shoved through comprehensive sex ed, which is explicit, and some parents were awake, but they not enough yet. Then you had the gender fluidity in preschool. Then you had the COVID shutdown where parents began to finally see what was actually going on. And now this is really the tipping point. Parents are tired of being told, as they did in our school district, that we are dissenters, basically to be ignored. The teachers' unions refer to us as barriers. And parents are standing up finally and saying, we're the primary stakeholders. We will not be ignored. And it's time we get back to the school boards, the educators, the elite, understanding that students do better statistically when parents are actively involved and engaged. Studies left and right show that. And so they're rising up. I'm very excited about what's happening now. And the most vocal of the parents that are reaching out to ParentsUnitedAmerica.org, our organization, are really the Black parents, because they see the inherent racism in critical race theory that's telling their own children that they somehow can't succeed unless there is an equity policy, which is not the same as equality. They have to dumb things down, raise things up. And I even know a science teacher, by the way, who was told that she had to dumb down her education so that Black students could maybe perhaps learn physics. It's outrageous. It's racism, and parents know it.
I know, Greg, in your recent podcast, we had a mutual friend and colleague, DeRoy Murdoch, who's been a strong critic of critical race theory, saying that it defines America as inherently and irredeemably bigoted, denouncing all whites as racial oppressors, and diminishes all African Americans as racially oppressed victims. I don't know how we got to the point where Martin Luther King's dream of being a nation that is colorblind, a colorblind society, and where did that go?
Well, proponents of critical race theory would cancel Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the greatest civil rights leader of our time. And DeRoy is absolutely correct. Critical race theory creates this color scheme of life. Everybody has to be judged solely on the level of melanin pigment in their epidermis. It's insane. It's stupid. Nobody with half a brain would accept this. It's garbage. But if you dare to disagree or challenge it, you are ipso facto a racist, a white supremacist. DeRoy, I can promise you, is neither. So what we have is children being taught this critical race theory that seeks to silence and suppress diversity of character, individual merit. Forget about it. All matters are to be seen through the lens of race and racism, and if you resist, you'll be demonized and canceled. But I must say, as I pointed out on the podcast, the good news is people like Deborah Flora are stepping forward and speaking up. They're fighting back, fed up by being told they're either racist or oppressed victims. 25 states now have crafted legislation prohibiting the teaching of critical race theory. 8 states have already banned or limited critical race theory in classrooms. So the momentum is shifted. There is this groundswell of anger that's directed at, the radical progressives who've commandeered the educational system. And thank goodness for people like Deborah Flora.
I look at what's happening, Deborah, and to me there are some very basic fundamental things. If we had school choice, I think the schools that would get the most dollars from parents, they would be the schools that stick to the fundamentals: reading, writing, math, science. And if parents can't agree on how to teach kids human sexuality or any of these other issues, I would argue that if they really are, if it's that important to the schools, well, we'll let parents opt into these classes after school and keep the school doors open an extra hour if it's that important to them. But in the meantime, let's get our kids doing the fundamentals. Computers, for example. We're missing the basics every day as we now move into social justice issues.
Absolutely. No, you hit the nail right on the head. The reality is the more woke the classrooms have been, the more students are being damaged. You shared some of these statistics at the beginning. America used to have the number one educational system amongst industrialized nations. According to the Program for International Student Assessment, PISA, right now, as of 2018, America's fallen to 28th out of 36 industrialized countries in math, 18th in science, not even in the top 10 in reading. In our own district, which is a fairly prosperous district, right now, the school board told us that we should be happy that just over half of the students are proficient in reading and less than half are proficient in math. If you want to help children of every walk of life prosper, especially the most vulnerable, those who are in the inner cities, the underprivileged, the poor students, especially with, those families that can't move to other areas, single moms, for instance, school choice is the answer, and education has always been the key to unlocking the potential of students. Instead, our hard-earned tax dollars are going for programs that are teaching social engineering, indoctrination, teaching one group of students that they are oppressed because of their skin colors, victims that can never achieve. They talk about the myth of meritocracy in critical race theory, basically telling students, don't even try, it's rigged against you, you're just incapable of advancing yourself, and then teaches beautiful children of a lighter melanin skin color that they are inherently evil and should be ashamed. This is not the job of the schools, and they're failing at their real job. When you look at school budgets, for instance, our school district, the budget is over $700 million. Barely over half is spent on education. Time for transparency, time for school choice. It will benefit students across this country. And honestly, time to return to the golden triangle where parents and teachers partner together for the good of the students without the infiltration of the unions and the special interest groups that they answer to.
All right, quick break. We'll come back more on what's happening in your school system around the country. Greg Jarrett and Deborah Flora, 800-941-SEAN. We'll get to your calls, final half hour of the program today, and we'll continue. As we continue with Greg Jarrett and Deborah Flora, as we discuss the teaching of critical race theory and the failure of many public school systems all around the country. If you look at the issues of law and order, Greg Jarrett, and safety and security for every American, so every American can pursue happiness, you add to that school choice and fixing our broken educational system, I believe that would be the bridge between the minorities in America and the Republican Party. Donald Trump was well on his way to building that bridge pre-COVID. We saw it with record low unemployment numbers. We saw it with criminal justice reform. We saw it with a commitment to historically black colleges. And I do believe these issues are critical for every American, and Democrats have failed, especially minorities in this country, and the numbers don't lie.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And Joe Biden's all on board. Democrats are on board. The progressive wing of the party.
What they're on board the road to mediocrity and
yes.
institutionalized failure?
When Americans are being taught to hate themselves, to hate their country, this is all part of the new woke mentality. And you've got to capitulate or you'll be silenced or threatened or punished or canceled or exiled. The very institutions, Sean, that are supposed to promote diversity of thought, those institutions are being exploited to eradicate dissent, any form of free thinking. Imagine students in an American classroom being taught, quote, all white people play a part in perpetuating systemic racism. That's what kids in Buffalo were told. They were also told that our education system perpetuates spirit murder against African American kids. Now, as a parent, your child comes home and repeats that, and you say, wait a minute, that's untrue. It's racist. And you'd be right. I mean, any sentence that begins with all white people is by definition wrong. And the words spirit murder in a classroom, I mean, that kind of language has no place where, as you point out, Sean, reading, writing, arithmetic are supposed to be taught. So, this critical race theory is being jammed down the throats of children everywhere. And, it's not just schools, but it's permeated government operations, corporate structures, the military, and the national mainstream media, who are the biggest cheerleaders of all.
It's unbelievable. You know what? And the thing is we can fix our educational system. We know how to do good policing. These are problems that are easily solved if you're committed to solving them, rather than appeasing a union that will provide you the funds to stay in power in perpetuity. Anyway, Greg Jarrett, Deborah Flora, thank you both for being with us. We appreciate your time and the hard work you're out there doing every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.